القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع بلادنا حققنا.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on Future TV. I'm Lina Tamim and these are today's top stories. President Michel Sleiman stresses that abiding by the Babda Declaration and the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 is key to stability in Lebanon. UN chemical weapons inspectors begin their second day of inspections into allegations of chemical weapons use in Syria. And Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says he believes that future talks between the US and Iran are possible. President Michel Sleiman stresses that Lebanon's neutrality towards the Syrian conflict, the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, and border control are key to stability in Lebanon. Sleiman made the remarks during the inaugural meeting of the International Support Group for Lebanon at the UN headquarters in New York, which highlighted the urgent need to enhance Lebanon's economy. A statement from the President's office says Sleiman stresses the need for continued support from internal parties as well as influential regional countries to abide by the Babda Declaration. The President also highlighted the need for continued international support toward promoting diplomatic preventive measures and a peaceful resolution of conflicts, as in the case of Syria. The primary mission of the International Support Group for Lebanon, which was headed by UN Chief Ban Ki-moon, is to shield Lebanon against the war in Syria through supporting Lebanese state institutions. Lebanese forces leader Samia Jarja criticizes Hezbollah for rejecting serious dialogue on its arms. Jarja accuses the party of having a plan to control the strategic decisions of the Lebanese state, in addition to its armed forces. His comments came in a response to questions on an initiative made by Speaker Nabih Berri to hold a several-day conclave at Babda Palace to discuss several controversial issues, including the national defense strategy and Hezbollah's arsenal. Asked about the presidential elections next year, Jarja says it is too early to discuss about his possible candidacy. He called for holding serious elections away from regional turmoil, as he says there hasn't been any true elections since the end of the civil war and under the pressure of the Assad regime. Former Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri has congratulated Chancellor Angela Merkel on winning in German parliamentary elections for a third time. A statement comes from Hariri's office, quoted him saying the success of achieved expresses the confidence of German people in her leadership and wise political plans for the management of the country. Merkel won a landslide victory over the weekend in the German parliamentary elections. UN chemical weapons inspectors begin their second day of inspections after returning to Syria to continue looking into allegations of chemical weapons used in the country's 2.5-year conflict. A convoy of 5 UN cars carrying at least 8 members of the team arrived at the Four Seasons Hotel yesterday. The inspectors, headed by Swedish scientist Åke Sällström, confirmed last week that sarin gas was used in an attack in Damascus, which killed hundreds of people on August 21st. President Bashar al-Assad's Western opponents say the inspectors' report left little doubt that his forces were to blame for the attack, but Syrian authorities have denied the accusations, saying it made no sense for them to wage such an attack. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad accuses the U.S. of terrorism. In an interview aired on Venezuelan state television Telesur, Assad said he doesn't rule out a U.S. strike. He added the close relations between his regime and the Lebanese Shiite groups Hezbollah consolidated the former's position regarding any aggression against Syria. The Syrian president also expressed his optimism concerning the current situation in his country, especially after the Russian-American agreement to secure the stockpile of the chemical weapons arsenal owned by his regime. Assad also warned that his country possessed weapons that are more lethal than chemical weapons. The Syrian president also criticized U.S. President Barack Obama, saying he is hesitant and unstable. An Iraqi woman has been killed when a mortar round slammed into Iraq's consulate in the Syrian capital of Damascus. A diplomat says the attack also wounded 3 others. There is no immediate confirmation of the nationality of the 3 wounded in the attack, which came at around noon. The source says none of the victims worked for the embassy. The Iraqi consulate is in an upscale part of Damascus and located near the Chinese embassy. Coming up next, Pakistan's education activist Malala Yousafzai is awarded one of this year's prestigious Clinton Global Citizens Awards. Stay tuned for the details. Welcome back. Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says he believes that future talks between the U.S. and Iran are possible, in spite of the optimism inspired by Rouhani's words during a PBS television interview. A failed effort to arrange a simple handshake between Obama and the new Iranian president at the UN on Tuesday underscored an entrenched distrust that will be hard to overcome. Iran's new government, stepping up a campaign to project a more moderate image abroad, says it wants to jumpstart talks with world powers to resolve a decade-long dispute over its nuclear program and hopes for a deal in 3 to 6 months.
Well, after all, we're speaking of two countries who have had no relations for 35 years. So it's clear that to begin talks requires some preparation work. And whenever the prep work is completed, I believe that it's possible to have a meeting. Perhaps if we had more time here in New York, we may have been able to coordinate what was necessary for that meeting to take place. We must all admit, I believe, that the principle of the meeting of the two sides is indeed important. But perhaps more important than that is the result of such a meeting. So we must make every effort so that the first high official meeting between the two countries will definitely yield positive results. The nuclear issue has turned into an issue of national pride and a symbol of the perseverance of the people. And I want to say that the people really have never demanded anything beyond what the law designates, nothing over and above what is rightfully theirs. And therefore, the nuclear issue is become a symbol of development of sorts in Iran. The modern know-how required to go hand in hand with this technology is a symbol for the Iranian people. So I think hand in hand we must move forward to ensure that the international law is enforced, and once we abide by that, I think everything else is settled.
Moving on to Iraq, 20 people have been killed following a series of explosions at 2 outdoor markets in the capital, Baghdad. Officials say 4 bombs in the Sabah al-Bur area north of the capital have killed at least 15 people. Meanwhile, another bomb hidden behind a kiosk went off and wounded scores of people as shoppers crowded inside the Al-Antarain market in the city's Dura neighborhood. Opposition fighters in Iraq often target crowded places such as markets, cafes, and mosques in order to inflict many casualties. More than 4,000 people have been killed in violence in the country during the past few months. And in Africa, foreign forensic investigators joined their Kenyan counterparts at the Nairobi Mall, where an attack claimed by Somali Islamist militants killed at least 72 people and destroyed parts of the complex. 2 Kenyan police officers have been killed in an attack on a security post near the Somali border, with the suspicion following on the same armed group behind the deadly siege at a Nairobi Mall. Today's attack took place in the town of Mandera. Regional police say 3 others were injured and 11 vehicles were destroyed. The attack came hours after the Somalia-based Al-Shabaab group threatened that violence will continue until Kenyan troops withdraw from Somalia. And in Pakistan, survivors in the southwest of the country have been forced to spend the night in makeshift shelters built with sticks and bed sheets after their mud homes were flattened in a massive earthquake that killed hundreds. The Pakistan National Disaster Authority put the death toll for Tuesday's quake at 348, but sources say the numbers of dead has already toppled 500. The 7.7 earthquake flattened wide swaths of Aurwan district in Balochistan province, leaving much of the population homeless. Reports say conditions are desperate among the survivors, and many are going without food, water, and shelter, having lost everything in the quake. The remoteness of the area and the lack of infrastructure hampered relief efforts. And now for news around the world in brief. At least 12 people, including 4 policemen and an army officer, have been killed after suspected separatist fighters raided a police station in the Indian-administered region of Kashmir before attacking a nearby army camp. Security forces fought the attackers at the army camp in Jammu region. Sources say 5 other soldiers have been critically wounded in the clashes. A UN-backed appeals court upholds Liberian ex-president Charles Taylor's 50-year sentence for arming rebels during Sierra Leone's brutal civil war. Taylor, 65, was found guilty in 2012 for supporting rebels from a neighboring Sierra Leone who waged a campaign of terror during the 90s civil war that claims 120,000 lives between 1991 and 2002 in exchange for blood diamonds mined by slave labor. An exhibition about one of ancient civilization's largest cities, titled Teotihuacan, 3 pyramids in the ritual landscape, is set to open at Mexico City's Templo Mayor Museum, revealing rare artifacts excavated at the pre-Hispanic city's towering pyramids. The exhibition features some 90 pieces uncovered from Teotihuacan, soaring stone structures, such as stone carvings of the feathered serpent, a prominent supernatural entity in Mesoamerican religions, amongst others. A British company launches its mass-produced tomato plant, which produces both tomatoes and potatoes. It sounds like science fiction, but the tomato is not actually the result of genetics engineering. Rather, each part is individually hand-grafted. Above the ground grows sweet cherry tomatoes and below white potatoes. Company manager Michael Perry says it is completely natural and safe. The tomato is being marketed as veg plot in a pot, as each plant can yield more than 500 tomatoes and a healthy crop of potatoes. Grafted potato and tomato plants have been around for over 15 years, but this is the first time that plants have been successfully produced commercially. Pakistan's education activist and crusader Malala Yousafzai has been awarded one of this year's prestigious Clinton Global Citizens Awards during a special ceremony in New York City. She received this year's Leadership in Civil Society Award. The 16-year-old, who was shot by the Taliban last year for attending school, has co-founded the Malala Fund to continue advocating for universal access to education. She is urging leaders to focus on education to resolve the world's problems, in her words.
And I hope that governments and all responsible people would realize that we cannot end war with a war. We can fight war through dialogue, peace, and education. We ask the governments and the responsible people, if you want to see peace in Syria, Afghanistan, and Pakistan, if you want to end the war, if you want to fight against the war, then instead of sending guns, send books. Instead of sending tanks, send pens. Instead of sending soldiers, send teachers. And instead of sending guns, send pens. Fight terrorism through education. And let me remind you once again that one book, one pen, and one teacher can change the world.
Very inspiring words, and on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. President Michel Sleiman stresses that abiding by the Baghdad Declaration and the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 is key to stability in Lebanon. UN chemical weapons inspectors begin their second day of inspections into allegations of chemical weapons use in Syria. And finally, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani says he believes that future talks between the US and Iran are possible. Those were today's headlines from Future Television live in Beirut. We'll be back again tomorrow for more of the world's top stories. Have a great evening.
من حفظ القيادة السورية على أرواح مواطنينا وأمن بلدنا.
Assad does not have significant military capability.
إذا قتلونا مع اليابان يحددنا.